Record. Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is daf Memches 48 already. We're finishing the fifth parak, Be'ezras Hashem, and we're beginning the Mishnah on daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Okay, so the Mishnah begins with. Okay, hold on. Let's just.
Yeah.
Yeah, Afang Shainun.
Yeah.
Hi, Alan. We just began. We're on daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Okay, so with the Mishnah. Okay, hold on. Okay, the Mishnah says, Hare. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Okay, so the Mishnah begins. Hareini Olecha Cherem. A guy says, I am to you. He says, I am to you like cherem, like bedek habayis, like something that you would donate my possessions to be viewed as something that you donate to the Beis Hamikdash. So basically, in another nutshell, he's trying to tell his friend that you cannot benefit from me. So then, hamudar asa, the vawi, the subject of that neder is asa. We've seen that before, that there's a madir, the guy that asers his friend, prohibits his friend from benefiting. So he said, my possessions should be like cherem of bedek habayis, where we're talking about a place, when you say the word cherem, you mean that my possessions should be like stuff that you donate to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the vawi is asa. That what happens, a guy says to somebody else, like say Shimon says to Reuven, Harei at olai cherem, your possessions are to me a cherem. It should be also to me like bedek habayis. So he asered himself on his friend's possessions. Again, haneder also, the one that made the meder is also. This is simple warm-ups, very simple. We've had this before. What happens? Each one said it. Hareini alecha va'atalai. One said, my possessions are also to you, and your possessions are also to me. So basically, they both become asur bahanoah. They're both prohibited from benefiting from each other's possessions. That's simple. But they're permitted, both permitted to use possessions that belong to each other. What does that mean? So the Mishnah says like this. There's a concept that there's some possessions that belong to the entire Klal Yisrael. What is that? For example, the Beis Hamikdash belongs to the entire Klal Yisrael. It's not like we're partners in the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash belongs to everybody. Well, let's say there's a well on their way up from Bavel from Iraq to Eretz Yisrael, a public well. People who travel to visit the Beis Hamikdash during the 3 regalim were permitted to take water from that well. So that is a public works that really doesn't belong just to one person or one subset of Klal Yisrael. It belongs to the entire Klal Yisrael, and it's like hefker, very important. Therefore, they can't aser each other on that. So they're both permitted to use that. We go to the top of the page. Ba'asurim, but they're both prohibited, the davar shel oisa ir, by something that belongs to the city, that both of them are equally partners of it. For example, a shul. If you both attend the same shul in the city, so if you made a neder that asered each other, right? That you asered him and he asered you, or vice same thing. So then both of you cannot attend that shul because both of you are partners in that shul, and therefore, when one goes into the shul, he's benefiting from the other's ownership in that shul. So the Mishnah gives you an example. The ezehu davar, what is considered something shel oili bavel, that belongs to the people who came up from Bavel. Oili bavel is a phrase that refers to something that belongs to the entire Jewish people. So something that belongs to all Jews is Kegain, Harabayis, the Temple Mount, Vazaris, basically the temple itself, Vahabar shebe'emtza adera, the pit, the cistern that's in middle on the road, traveling up to Eretz Yisrael, to the Beis Hamikdash. A public water well is permitted for everybody. Nobody can aser somebody on that because it's hefker. The ezehu davar shel oiseir. But what is an item that is a problem? that belongs to the city and it belongs to the inhabitants of the city, and therefore, if because they can't benefit from each other, they both cannot use these things. Kegoin harchava. Harchava was the open public square of the city that was designated for a place that you davened or had public events, let's say concerts or things like that. Bahamerkats, or the public bathhouse. Again, if you live in the city, everybody has a partnership in it. Ubeis Knesses, or the shul. Or I would say yeshiva is that way, but it doesn't always work that way. But Beis Knesses means everybody is a partner in it. It's like basically you own shares of stock, Bahat Teva. Or let's say the box that holds the Sifrei Torah, Bahasfarim, and the books that you read from them. So therefore, all these things, if there's a neder involved, both of them cannot use them. They cannot go to the shul. They cannot use their books in the shul, or they can't go to the merchats. So the Mishnah gives you an advice. What should they do if they both want to use it? If you write, each one should write that they're giving up their portion to the president. So really, they're giving up. We don't have ownership in it, and it belongs to the Nasi, to the president of the shul or the president of the Jewish people. And therefore, if they don't own it, so the other person that comes into the shul is not benefiting from his friend that he's also to have anah from. He's benefiting of something that really belongs to the Nasi. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, Echad koisev lenasi, the Echad koisev lehedyed. You don't have to give your ownership of the shul or whatever it is to the president. You can write it to the president, or you can give it to another guy in shul. But ma bein koisev lenasi the koisev lehedyed. What would be the difference if you wrote it to the president? You gave your share to the president, or you wrote it to the hedyed, to a regular person in shul. Shaha koisev lenasi, if you write it over to the president, ein sarach lezakos, you don't even have to make a kinyan. You see, if I'm giving you something, if I'm giving a plain person something, either I have to make a kinyan, which means to show that I really mean it. So either I would give him, let's say, he would give me, let's say, a handkerchief, and in li'u of the handkerchief, I will have in mind that I'm giving him my ownership of the shul. Okay. But for a nasi, if you just give it to the president, you don't even have to you don't even have to do that, make a kinyan. You could actually just say, I'm giving it to the nasi, and that's enough. You don't have to do any kinyan because it belongs to Chachamim gave special powers to the nasi. I believe it means the nasi of Klal Yisrael. Lehedyet, not just the president of that city. Lehedyet, but if you're giving it over to a plain person, sarach lezakas, you must do something that shows that the other person really owns your share. So that's the difference. But Chachamim says no. Even echad zeh, the echad zeh tzrich lezakas. There's no power to the nasi, to the president, but rather whether you're giving it to a plain person or you're giving it to the nasi, you need to make some sort of ownership formality to show that the nasi took possession of your ownership. Like dibru b'nasi, but they didn't say give it over to the nasi ela b'hoiva, because that's what people used to do. Because there's a problem, if you gave it over to another guy in shul, your ownership of the shul, that guy might turn around and asa you again. So therefore, the more sane thing to do is, if you don't have too many friends in the shul, give it to the nasi, and he'll never asa you from going into the shul. Says the Gemara, says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda said, Ein anshe Galil tzrichen lichta, people who lived in the north of Israel, let's say Tzvas or whatever, so then they don't have to even give it over to the nasi. Because when they made a shul in Tzfas, in the Galil, they automatically gave the ownership of the shul to the nasi. Their fathers, the ones that established the shul, already gave over the shul to the president. Now, why would they do that? So because the people of Galil were always fighting with each other. It's like an old Holocaust shul where the survivors came, and sometimes during every Shabbos, there was a big fight broke out. So they knew the people, it was the people in Galil that always had fights with each other, and they were always answering each other, b'derech neder. So the people who established the shuls in the Galil automatically gave the ownership of the shuls to the Nasi. And therefore, nobody who lives in the city of Galil owns anything of the shul. So therefore, even if your friend asked you got into a fight with him, you can still walk into the shul. The Gemara says, Amai mitzvah. Why does it remain usher if you wrote it if you gave over your part to the president? If the language of the Mishnah seems to imply that you're forever not permitted to go into the shul or bathhouse, and even if you gave it over to the president. So the Gemara asks, why should it remain usher? You don't own it anymore. There's something words missing. Hachi kitani. This is what the language of the Mishnah is missing, which we spoke out. My takanasan. What is the remedy for people who assered each other? I assered my friend assered me. We can't go to shul anymore. They should give over their portion of the shul, their ownership of the shul, to the Nasi, to the president of Jewish people, and therefore, when the other guy goes into the shul, he's not benefiting from me. He's benefiting the ownership of what I gave over to the Nasi. It's not my own. I don't own it anymore. So even though he's also to me, b'derech neder, he can use the shul, the merchatz, and the public works. Rabbi Yehuda ein anshe galil tzrichen lezakus. We skip all these parentheses because that's just repeating the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says ein anshe galil tzrichen lezakus shekavar kosvu avesein al yadeim. The people who live in Galil didn't even have to do this. They knew that the people of Galil are going to get into a fight, and therefore, when they established the shuls from the very get-go, it all belonged to the Nasi. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda said, Anshe Galil, the people who live in the north, Hamtaronin Hayo. You see, are cantankerous. You see this, I don't know what the origin of this word, the etymology of this word, but this definitely means kantarin, they're cantankerous people. Maybe from the word rancor. It was often they got into a fight and people would answer each other from benefiting from each other. So Amdu Avasayim, the people who established those cities in the north, the Kasul Chalkeim Lanasi, any public works now belongs to the president of the Jewish people, and therefore nobody owns anything. Again, this comes up. I mean, in a shul that all the members died, and the people moved away because the neighborhood changed. So it often happens, who owns the shul? And it still belongs to the people who benefits from the real estate. So this happens all the time. Anyway, Hamuda Hana New Mishnah. Hamuda Hana Mechavere Ve'en Lei Ma Yoichel. A guy has an usher, cannot benefit from his friend. Okay, Shimon cannot benefit from Reuven, and now Shimon's in a pickle because he has no food to eat. So Reuven is the only one that can help him out. So nois noi la'acher l'shum matana. So if Reuven has a loaf of bread, he can give it to somebody else, let's say a Levi, and then Shimon could take it because he's not taking it from Reuven. Reuven actually gave it over as a gift to Levi, and so Shimon now could take from Levi. And it's not considered as if he's benefiting from Reuven. Now says the Mishnah, a fascinating story. Listen to this story. It sounds like a millennial story. Ma'asa be'echad be'beis Chorim. There was a man in Beis Chorim. Shahaya aviv noidra hana mudar hana mimenu. He had got into a fight with his father, and he asked his father from benefiting from his possessions. And so when you ask your father from benefiting in possession, it all works well, except when you have to make a shidduch. So this guy had to make a shidduch, and he had to make a shidduch, and in those days the boy paid for the wedding, and he wants his father to come to participate in the wedding. But he has a neder. So he says to his friend, I have a chotzer and a party. I rented a hall, and I made this lavish party and paid for it in the big hotel. And I'm giving all this, it belongs to you. He tells his friend, it's all yours. Ella, but you should know, the reason why I'm giving it to you, obviously it's not yours. It's only so I can have my dad come and participate in the wedding. So it was a funny way of giving it to someone. It wasn't a gift. He gave it to him so that he could get around that his father could attend the wedding. So the man said, the recipient of this half a gift, Im shalihem, if it's mine, the whole wedding, I'm donating it for tzedakah. or to the Beis Hamikdash. So I'm giving it away. Amalei, so the man making the wedding got so scared. Nasati I didn't give it to you so that you can donate it now to tzedakah. I gave it to you so now I can have my father come. Amalei, so the guy who received it said, I knew that you're using me as a ruse to get around a big avera. Nasati li eshelcha, you gave me yours. You only did it so that you and your father should come and try to make up with each other, but it's illegal because really the neder is still in effect. They are oven and the big avera of allowing somebody to be over to transgress a neder will be on my head. Barashai means his head, but he meant his own head because I'm the tools that you're using to do this big avera of getting around the neder that you made. And the story came to the Chachamim, and the Chachamim said the guy is right. Amru Chachamim, kol matana, any gift, that cannot be, that he doesn't have the opportunity, that if he would make it holy, he could give it to tzedakah, he could give it to tzedakah. In other words, if the recipient of the gift does not have the power to give it away to hegdish, ein matana, that's not called a gift. A gift is something that there's no strings attached. And here, there was wink, wink attached. In fact, he spelled it out for him that I'm giving you this gift only so that my father, could come to the wedding. So that's not considered to be a gift. So the Gemara says, Ma'asa Listar. You start off the Mishnah saying that giving it to a third party is a good idea. And then you bring a story where it doesn't work. So usually some words are missing in the Mishnah because the flow of the Mishnah is not smooth. So the Gemara says, yes, you're right, there's something missing from the Mishnah. If you can see his words, what his intention was from the very beginning, also, then it's not a good idea. The end, we saw what his intention was, that he didn't really mean it to give it as a gift, and therefore it's not considered a good way, or it's not considered as if he gave it as a gift, and therefore you cannot benefit. The father technically could not benefit and come to the wedding. Amar Rava, so Rava qualified this statement. Now I want to point out to you that we always know that sometimes matona al manachs lahachzir, let's say a lulav, you only have one lulav in esrog, and you want your son to be yotzei, so you give it over to him as a matana, and he's yotzei the lulav in esrog. Okay, my family, only my father had a lulav in esrog, so he bought it, and then when he finished using it on the first day, would give me a gift with the condition that I have to give it back. But that is a real wholehearted 100% gift. And he didn't say any strings attached. It was just self-understood that after I'm finishing using it, I'm going to gift it back to my father. Fine. Here, it's a very different. The guy said that I'm giving you the whole meal, the whole entire wedding, in order so that my father could come to the wedding. So that is ready and not considered a full-fledged gift. Amar Rava. So Rava qualified. He said, Lo shanu ela da'ama le v'hin chalafonach ela kadesh yavei abba. I'm giving it to you only so that my father could come. So he said, here it is, only so that my father could come. Let's say he worded it like this. He gives it to his friend, it's yours, but I would love my father, my father could come. So the amalei. So then he's really giving the recipient of the gift the choice to invite the father. So it wasn't really a set condition attached. Then our Mishnah would hold that if he did it that way, it would be considered a good gift, because he didn't say definitively you have to invite my father, or I'm giving you the gift so that my father can come. I'm giving it to you. I would like that my father to come, but it's up to you. So therefore, that's considered a good gift. But Lishna Achrina, another version would say that's not a good gift. Why? Because who gives a whole wedding that you just invested $125,000 for this big wedding, give it as a gift to somebody? It's obvious that you're giving it as a phony gift so that your father could attend the wedding. Amar Rava, this is what Rava said. Don't say that the only reason why it's not a good gift because he said, here is it for you and only for my father. Who da'asa? Here it is, but I would like my father to come and eat. Mutter, don't say that. Even if he said, the whole meal is yours, but how about having my father come? It would still be asa. My tama, what's the reason? Sudasai maichachas olav. It's very clear that the fact that he spent so much money on this wedding, he just doesn't gift it away for anything. So he's gifting it so that to get around the neder that he ushered his father from coming. So even that would be usher to do in Beis Charan to allow the father to come. Okay, now let's go to Amud Beis. The Gemara tells a story. Ahu Gavra, there was this man. The Havale brought, that had his son, the Havashamet Kefei de Kisana. He was stealing bundles of flax. Okay, now his father saw that his son is a kleptomaniac. Or one other version of Rashi is that his son was so busy with flax, he doesn't learn Torah. So his father, Asrinu l'nichse alai, he said that I don't want my son to ever benefit from my possessions. When I die, all my possessions are prohibited on him. He cannot benefit from those possessions. So now the son cannot inherit his father. So the people, his advisors, his lawyers told him, or his good friends told him, but what happens if that son gets married and has a grandson, and that grandson turns out to be a righteous person, a Talmud Chacham? Wouldn't you want your anical to benefit, your grandson to benefit from your possessions? That's the question. If your grandson turns out to be a rabbi, Talmud Chacham, would you want him to be also on your possession? So he said to his advisors, you're right. He had two sons that he wanted. He had two sons. Let's say he had two sons. One son is the person he thought was a klepto. So he said like this. He said that split my inheritance in half to the two sons, the one good son and the one not so good son. But that son should hold on to it. He shouldn't benefit from my possessions after I die, but it depends. If he turns out to have a grandson that turns out to be a Talmud Chacham, that half that he got should be gifted over. He should hold it so that he gives it over right away to the grandson. And if he doesn't have a grandson that's a Talmud Chacham, then the whole that 50% goes to the other kosh, the good son. So then that's what he said. Likni hadeng, let him get it and let him acquire my possessions after I die, but he can't benefit from it. And if he has a grandson that is a Talmud Chacham, then he'll get that half. And if he doesn't, then it goes back to his brother. That's what he told. That's what his idea was. Is this a good idea? The problem is, can you hold something that you're not really, it's not yours, but you're just like a pass-through. He's a pass-through entity, this son. Why? Because he can't benefit from it. He's just holding on to it for his, if maybe he has an anical, maybe he has a son that's worthy of the inheritance. So Amri Pumpadisa said, Knei amanas lahaknasi. You're acquiring something, not that you can use it, but you have to give it over to somebody else. If you acquire something only on condition to give it over to somebody else, loikani, that's not considered acquiring. So this idea is not even a good idea, according to the Pumpadisa people, the Talmidei Chachamim from Pumpadisa. Rav Nachman said, Kanei. He does get it. Why? Because Rav Nachman says we find in Dinei Mamonis, when it comes to civil transactions, we find that a person does acquire things as a pass-through entity, right? We're learning all about pass-through entities. Why? Let's say I want to buy a field from somebody. I don't have the money to pay for it now, but when I know I'm going to wire the money when I get a chance. But I want to make sure he doesn't sell it to somebody else. So we make a kinyan, which means that I'm the owner, he can't back out. How do I make a kinyan? I give him, let's say, my handkerchief. And I say, I'm giving you my handkerchief. Mr. Owner of the field, you have now in mind that you're giving me the field. And the handkerchief, it's understood that the owner of the field is going to give me back my handkerchief. This was just a formality so that I can have a kinyan so he can't back out. So the question is, really, the owner of the field is holding on to something that he can't acquire it. He must give it back to me. And you see, pass-through entities do work in civil cases. So same thing over here. The boy who's not worthy of the inheritance will hold on to the inheritance for his child who might be worthy, and therefore he's not going to benefit, but he's going to can hold on to it, so to give it to the Einikel. So that's what Rav Nachman says. The Hasadura Knei Amanas Lahaknesu. Every handkerchief, the seller takes the handkerchief from the purchaser and just uses it to consummate that he's firm selling the field to this person, and then he gives him back the handkerchief. So we see that this idea of being a pass-through entity does exist in civil cases. So Amar Ravashi challenged Rav Nachman. He said, first of all, Man who will tell you that by the case of the civil case, what happens if the seller of the field decides to keep the handkerchief? Who says it's not going to work? Who says he has to give it back? He might decide not to give it back. And furthermore, by the case of the handkerchief case, when the buyer gives over the handkerchief to the seller, the transaction of the seller happens right away. He's selling me the field, right? I'm the purchaser. I give him the handkerchief. He sells me the field. So the pass-through happens right away. Now he gives me back the handkerchief. But halein, in this case, the nichse hadain of this possessions, le'ema saikoni. When does the pass-through happen? When this person has an einikel, because the kid that's not a good kid, he's not really buying he's not the pass-through yet until he has a son that's a tshuva merabanan, a good son. So he's basically in limbo. It doesn't belong to anybody until he has a son. And at that time, yes, then he could pass it through. But the kinyan happened way before. So basically, he's a pass-through entity in the future. When he has it already, the kinyan happened already. In other words, the whole idea of giving your son the rights to the possessions of your property, you're doing the kinyan now, but the pass-through entity only takes effect much later. So in this case, with the son, it should not work. So basically, Rav Ashi said, I agreed with the Pumpadisa that it's a pass-through entity. In this situation, it shouldn't work. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav Nova said to Rav Nachman, by the way, Rav Nachman would hold that when a person gives it over to his son, he wants it to take effect right now. The pass-through entity starts right now, just he doesn't pass it on to his kid only much later. Anyway, Amalei Rav Nachman asked the question to Rav Nachman. You're saying pass-through entities always work, but our Mishnah was a pass-through entity. A guy made a wedding, and he wanted to invite his father, so he used his friend as a pass-through entity. Here, the wedding is yours. Now my father could come. And we see in our Mishnah it doesn't work. The whole point of the third party taking possession of the wedding was only so that he can give it back to allow the father to attend. We said it doesn't work. So Rav Nachman, your psak is a difficulty to our Mishnah. So Rav Nachman always had a teretz. He said, Zimlin amalei mishum desudase muchachas alav. Sometimes he answered this question. You're asking me from the Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we see that the guy didn't mean it, because the fact that he made this big party and he said, I'm giving it to you only on condition that you allow my father to come. So that is not really a good gift. So therefore, in our Mishnah, it doesn't work. But here, we don't have the truth is the guy really wants it to give it over So to give it over, to eventually give his property over to his grandson if he turns out to be worthy of it. So he really, really means it. Sometimes you can say that our Mishnah is dealing with neder. Neder will always going strict when it comes to nedarim. We find that, let's say, if I cut through my friend's property to get to shul, okay? So normal people don't have hakpada on that, and therefore it's permitted for me to do so it's not considered gezela. However, if my friend asked me from benefiting from him, so then we go strict by neder, and I can't walk through his property, even though that's something that people don't, let it slide. So we see that even things that let slide are also when it comes to neder. So by neder, we're going strict. We're always strict. But here we're dealing a regular civil case. A guy wants to figure out how to transfer his property to his grandson if his grandson turns out to be a Talmud Chacham. He doesn't want his son to benefit from that. So then it could work. So now we learned in our Mishnah, Amru Chachamim, the Chachamim said, Kol matana she'eina, she'mekdisha te mekdashes, eina matana. Chachamim said that any gift that is not totally in the possession of the recipient, that he can make it hegdish, is not considered a gift. Kol, lasu, why do we use this kol? Any gift, lasu yamai, lav la tuye, hamilsa deshadya bekepa. That this is, it's coming to be marba, this case over here, that a guy wants to use his son to pass through, not that his son could benefit from his property, but to use his son as a pass through to give it to his son, to the anacle, to the grandson. So we see that if the son couldn't benefit, he cannot be used as a pass through. So isn't that what the Mishnah trying to include and tell you that's not considered a good gift? And says the Gemara, no, not so. La tuya lishna basra d'shmaitzi the Rava. It's coming to be marba what Rava said, that if there's a obvious reasons, in your face reason, an elephant in the room reason, where you can tell that nobody does give such gifts, no one's that magnanimous that give over a gift of a whole wedding to somebody. It's so obvious that he's giving it so that his father could attend the wedding, then it doesn't work. But in economy, a guy has a son that he doesn't want his son to benefit from his wealth. And he wants to use his son as a pass-through so that if his son will have a child that's a worthy kid, he wants his grandson to benefit from his property. He can do, according to Rav Nachman, make his son prohibited on his possessions, only on condition, and he should be a pass-through to be able to transfer it to his grandson if his son has a son worthy of the possessions. And that's the opinion of Rav Nachman. Again, Pumpadisa disagreed with this way around it. Knei Amanas Nahaknes doesn't work. Okay.